The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
One people, one nation, searching through the night. One people, one nation, searching for the light. Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We can be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring mythology and the fifth world. When the world didn't end on 12/21/12, many decided the Mayan calendar was passé, that no change took place. This couldn't be further from the truth. We're still in the middle of a major transition prophesied by many cultures and teachings, including the Bible. This transition is the result of our solar system entering a portion of the galaxy containing a much greater bandwidth of frequency or light. Frequency dictates reality. The reality of the fourth world was supported by the set of frequencies our solar system is leaving. We're entering fifth world reality, which is being created by the new bandwidth. This transition from one set of frequencies to the next is a cyclic occurrence charted by the Mayan calendar among many other ancient teachings. Mythological gods and goddesses are archetypes of human expression and dictate reality through the frequency they carry. By aligning with the frequency characterized by a particular deity, a person can embody the attributes they represent. During the darker fourth world times, the archetypes, myths, and legends became dogmatic and monodimensional. Therefore, the teachings that were handed down consisted of partial information and a limited view. Now that we're moving into the expansive frequency of the fifth world, there are gaps in what's left of the archetypes, myths, and legends. The last time we were in the age of greater light or frequency, our myths were profound and multidimensional. Now, what's left of this information is missing more expansive bandwidths, creating the aforementioned gaps. We're moving into a time of differentiation, coming from an era when the masses maintained dogmatic adherence to a particular concept with no tolerance or room for individuality. As the light increases, we're challenged with expressing and understanding a much wider frequency landscape. Rather than the cookie-cutter expressions of the past, we have the opportunity to embrace our unique set of frequencies and operate as an organism consisting of many parts. That is to say, when each of us expresses a distinct set of frequencies, they combine, forming a much more expansive reality. As we expand, our archetypes, myths, and legends must expand also, as they provide the collective human psyche with the necessary reference points to embrace our increasing frequency potential. The dilemma is the missing information. Information itself is a frequency. This frequency is neither created nor is it destroyed. It's always available for a multidimensional individual to access regardless of the age we're in. These individuals are sometimes known as shaman. Through ritual work and trance work, a well-trained shaman can access any information that's ever existed. The difficulty lies in translating it into a format that can be understood and applied within the ambient frequencies. This framework is comprised of our archetypes, myths, and legends. As we move into the fifth world and the greater expansiveness therein, it's necessary to use trance work to access the missing frequencies. This access fills in the gaps of our existing archetypes, myths, and legends so that they can continue to serve as translation points as we evolve. With the resurgence of the shamanic way, shamanic training is becoming increasingly available. Through shamanic trance work and ritual, we can access a fuller expression of our personal archetypes, myths, and legends, that they may better serve us during these transitional times. There's no longer a need to find the one true representation of the archetypes and adhere to or argue about it. Instead, we could each find the appropriate representation to serve our personal path at this time. Our guest this hour, Alice Karlsdóttir, author of Norse Goddess Magic, Trancework, Mythology, and Ritual, has been involved in Germanic Heathen ritual for nearly 40 years, both as a student of Scandinavian and Northern European mythology and folklore and practicing Norse Pagan. We will introduce Alice after this short commercial break, and together we'll delve into the amazing world of archetypes, tranceworks, mythologies, and rituals. So don't go away. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Alice Karlsdóttir, author of Norse Goddess Magic, Trancework, Mythology, and Ritual. Her website, www.mad-alice.blogspot.com. Alice, thank you for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Thank you for having me.
How'd you get involved in Norse Goddess Magic in the first place?
Well, my mother's side of the family is Scandinavian, and she started reading me those myths from a very early age. Those are the first mythology I encountered, and so it kind of, it always resonated with me and had a place in my heart. And later in college and afterwards, when I started getting involved with tranceworking and magic and pagan ritual, that was the mythology that I was drawn to.
So would you mind defining it? What is Norse Goddess Magic exactly, and how does it differ from other magical practices?
Well, that's the title of the book. I don't know if I call it Norse Goddess Magic. It's this particular methodology is a method of tranceworking, going into a trance state and doing what you see in Norse lore is sometimes called faring forth, or kind of traveling out of your body to other worlds to encounter beings. And the tranceworking methods are really kind of generic. They could really be used not just with Norse mythology, but with any kind of working that you desired to reach a type of trance state to do. And I chose to visit the Norse gods because that was what I was interested in and working with. I picked goddesses in particular just because I think in general, and especially in the Norse community at that time, there was kind of a feeling that they knew the goddesses should be important, but there really wasn't enough information on many of them, so they kind of were neglected. And I was trying to supplement what was found in the lore about these particular figures with more esoteric working, because not working as a scientist or an anthropologist, I felt free to use other methods to supplement my knowledge and my connection to these figures.
So you combined traditional research from the written legends that have been passed down and what have been given to you from your mother with trance work to get the information that you have on them?
Yes, and ritual to some extent too. And there's also information carved on monuments, things like that, available in books describing archaeological finds.
Okay, gotcha. So what kind of trance work do you use? Where'd you learn it?
Well, that I kind of taught myself, because I'm not very good at doing trance work, or I used to not be. When I was a pagan, I would go to gatherings and participate in workings or workshops done by other people. It seemed like other people would be in a trance state, and I would still kind of just be in the preliminaries. And for a long time I thought that was just something you either could do or you couldn't, and that I just wasn't skilled in that way. And I also do theater, so I was in an acting workshop, and they had a speaker there who was a hypnotist, among other things. And he kind of put people into various stages of hypnosis, like as a crowd, and he made a statement saying that everyone could be hypnotized, but there were just different levels, and some people took more steps than others. And so that got me looking at it again. I thought maybe I can do trance work, and I just, need more preliminary work to get into a trance state. So I did a lot of research, talking with practitioners, and I read a lot of books on hypnosis and various things like that, and I experimented with a lot of the trance induction methods, and I did finally get much better at going into trance. And because I had to teach myself, I think I'm more aware of maybe the methods or the technology than I would have been if I had just naturally been able to do it without giving it any thought. And the other thing I learned about trance working is that it really is a learned skill. It's not just something that you're either talented or you're not. That you can actually, if you work at it and use, practice it and use enough different methods, you can actually train yourself to be better at it.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of like exercise, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And how to interpret what you get and all that stuff. It doesn't come natural. You have to learn it.
That is the tricky part, yes.
Yeah. So how do you view gods and goddesses? What are they exactly?
Well, I don't really, believe they're anthropomorphic figures living somewhere. I think they're types of powers or a combination of powers. I'm not sure we can really know exactly what they are. I do believe they're real, and I believe that the human-like figures we see in the myths is kind of their way of communicating with us in a way that we can understand. So it's not like I think there is a man with red hair and a beard called Thor living on a mountain somewhere, but I believe that he presents that figure appears that way in so many of the stories in the myths is a way of saying something to us, almost like images in a dream. So I do think the myths are valuable because they're a way of interacting, kind of a middle ground between the human way of thinking and what the gods are, to enable us to communicate and understand each other.
So like they're an archetypical representation of a particular frequency?
You could say it that way. A frequency, a power, a being. I really believe that we can't really perhaps fully understand, what they really are. But I think we can understand what their functions are, what their essence is to some extent, through mythology and ritual.
So what can working with these archetypes provide people for today? Well, what's the practical application today?
Well, for one thing, I mean, it is a way of understanding in a way that's more perhaps accessible than reading a dry scholarly book. And I think by seeing the gods as human-like or as figures, it enables you to get sort of an emotional connection to them more than if you see them as just a very abstract thing. It's very hard, and to some degree, like magic and ritual requires a certain amount of passion or emotion, and it's very hard to get that. It's kind of hard to get worked up over an abstract concept the way you could over what becomes almost like an old friend once you become familiar with them.
So it's more like having a heart connection.
Yes,
Yeah.
and even a sensual connection, because you can visualize appearances and smells and sounds and that kind of tactile stuff, and I think we need that, especially when we're beginning in ritual, that sort of thing to kind of help our mind get in the right place.
Got it. So do you think it's important to work with deities that align with our personal ancestry? And if so, why?
I think for me, there's a power in that, because in my, I kind of feel like maybe I had ancestors that worship those same deities. I don't think that's necessary. I think the important thing is that a certain, the deities of a certain culture resonate with you, have a powerfully draw you and mean something to you with their symbology.
So, it seems like our bloodline might hook us in closer to the archetypes or the gods and goddesses that our ancestry worshipped or aligned with, but you think we can also use, say, Kuan Yin, whether we're Oriental or not. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think what's familiar to you perhaps is more likely to draw you, but I have known people, that were just strongly drawn to and strongly impressed by a different culture, and they seem to work, quite well and powerfully that way. So, I wouldn't say, to restrict yourself necessarily. I think it's good to explore your own culture just to see what it has to offer, so that if you choose not to work with that, you at least know what your own ancestors might have done.
Right.
But I don't think it's necessary.
Do you think a person has to give up their personal religion in order to work with the different archetypes?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Certainly you could do a tranceworking to a different deity. I've known people, I've participated in rituals of other people that worked with a different pantheon, and I know I've had some experiences and connections. I think but I still do my own workings. I don't feel like I was cheating on my gods by doing that or something.
I like that, cheating on your gods.
Well, there are certain figures from different pantheons that do kind of resonate, have a strong draw to me that I particularly like or am drawn to when I'm in those rituals, and they're not anything to do with my pantheon. I don't know why those particular ones, but I don't do my daily workings and rituals with that tradition necessarily.
Kind of makes you wonder about past life connection or something, doesn't it?
Maybe. I don't know. Sometimes I will say that the gods and goddesses from different traditions that I do find appealing seem to have qualities similar to the Norse gods and goddesses that I am particularly drawn to. So maybe there is some kind of overarching archetype, or I just have a tendency to be drawn to the same types of frequencies or gods.
Got it. Well, we're going to have to take a little break here, but Alice and I will return to our discussion after the news at the bottom of the hour. You're listening to The Science of Magic. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Previous broadcasts of thought-provoking episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. We'll be back, so don't you go away. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. Visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Alice Karlsdóttir, author of Norse Goddess Magic, Trancework, Mythology, and Ritual. Her website, www.mad-alice.blogspot.com. Alice, we were talking about combining research and trance work in the writing of your book. And I wondered if you would mind going a little deeper into how you pulled the two of those together.
Well, in my method, before attempting any trance work, I would do a lot of research first, just to get a grounding. Even if there's not much information, I think it's useful to at least know what information there is out there. There are, compared to some traditions, there are still a lot of myths and ritual stones and carvings and other artifacts for Scandinavian and some other Germanic cultures out there. So it's useful to find that out, and it's also kind of useful to, I call it, to prime the pump, is to just get information. Instead of it's like when you're in school and your teacher says write an essay about anything you want. It's always really hard to think of a topic. Whereas if you have some kind of guidelines, it makes it easier for me to have a successful trance. And I also like if my ancestors or if people in the past already knew something about these gods, then I certainly want to know what they found out or what's out there. And you have to be careful because especially all sources really, secondary sources particularly, you need to also see who wrote them, like what time period, was it written by a practicing pagan or was it written a century later by someone who had been nominally Christianized, or was it written by someone in the 1900s who, kind of had other axes to grind, just so that you kind of know where they're coming from. And I would accumulate all that information. And then I'd also, I'd try to find like fairy stories or legends from that tradition, especially myths involving the gods, to kind of, it's not factual information, but because of what I was working with, it gave an emotional or a sensory component to kind of put me in the right mood and give me a better sense of who that god was. And then when I'd kind of mulled that over for a period of time, and when I was ready, I usually would set up a ritual to do the trance in, both as a protected place and also to include, I would try to include maybe if there were objects associated with that goddess, I would put them on the altar and kind of use colors and smells or things that from what I knew I thought might be appropriate to that deity to kind of help my mind and my senses be better attuned to it. And I'd usually write a short invocation based on what I did know about that goddess. And then I do this ritual, and then in the center of the ritual I would do a trance working. I do an induction based on the transinduction techniques I had learned and been working with. And for me, I like it better than someone else doing a guided meditation because, like I said, especially in the beginning, I had trouble going into trance. And when I do it in myself, talk myself through it in my head, as it were, I could use as many different techniques. I used a layering. I've kind of developed a standard trance induction journey. But if I'm doing a trance and I'm not into what I consider a proper trance state, when I get to the end, I have these other techniques that I can just keep using them until I finally do get into a trance, or I might stop before I use up the preliminaries if I get into a trance in a hurry. And then while in this trance state, I would like take a journey, and I would start out. It was a house I grew up in. I would imagine it was like it still is a real place actually. It's not where I live now, but I would imagine myself on my bed in my childhood room in that house, and in my closet there was like an underground trap door that led under the house. It was an old pier and beam house, and you could crawl under there to, do work or inspect the plumbing or whatever. But it actually exists. It was like a door to the underworld, if you would. So, but it was real. So like this is all real. There are things I can imagine easily, and I would imagine going through that trap door and crawling into the house, and then I do these various trance induction things, which involved, imagery, and eventually I would come out and it into a place that kind of is a house of my imagination that I've kind of crafted over the years, and I'd go on this journey. I use like the image of being in a boat or raft on the water at one point, and at some point, so these are all kind of real things, and they're familiar things both of my imagination and the real world, and at some point in the journey it would become a trance where I would start going places or encountering things that I hadn't thought of before or seen, and at that point I'm not guiding or controlling the trance so much as seeing what will happen, and because I've done the work invoking the particular goddess and thinking about her, that I would usually encounter that deity eventually, and sometimes they would talk to me. Sometimes some were easier for me to reach than others. I don't know if that is a quality of that particular goddess or if I just am more attuned to some than others, but some it would be almost like a conversation. Others it was kind of like scattered images, almost like a dream, and you'd have to figure out later what it meant.
Right,
and
so instead of a fireside chat, you have all these images and you've got to interpret them, yeah.
And I would get, I have a pretty clear visual picture now of most of those goddesses. And again, it's like it's not like I think that is the way that goddess looks, and if someone else sees her with blonde hair, they're wrong. But it's the way they presented themselves to me. I had one goddess in particular that spoke with a country Texas accent, and it's not like I don't think that goddess has a country Texas accent, but I think it was saying something to me because I'm from Texas and I know that accent. If I were from England, I might have heard her with a Yorkshire accent, but I think it was saying something that she was kind of down to earth and, like a country person, perhaps.
Right.
But
so it seems like.
I'm sorry. And then I would write down right after the trance. I would come when I either I would be ended. Either I would have ended whatever interaction I was having, or sometimes I would start losing the trance. Everything starts getting a little faded, or at some point, and I would kind of make a quicker return journey back the way I came, and back up through the hole in the house, and kind of end it in a controlled manner. Then I would write down everything afterwards, and then I'd review it.
Yeah, journaling is so important, isn't it? Because it kind of slides right back into the unconscious if you don't anchor it.
Yeah, it's like dream work. You really have to write it down, or you'll forget things. I also, especially, people have asked how you know if this is real or just in your head, and of course you don't. And it is like a dream. Like there can be personal things in there. And I keep a journal, so I would write down everything. I usually would try to visit the same goddess more than once to compare the journeys, and I would also look back at what I'd been doing. And there's been sometimes that if I had seen a film or read a book, like the day of the trance or the day before, I might see images or ideas from that creeping into the trance, and so I might discount those things, especially if they didn't show up again as being like me. And some things seem to be more general. I have talked to other people that saw similar things about the same goddess without having ever talked to me about it beforehand, but just independently we saw or had, some same impression. So that kind of, like if two people see the same thing and they didn't have any interaction before, I kind of tend to think that might be more real, more archetypal.
Right. Those synchronicities are amazing when you're sharing journey work with other people after the fact, and you see all these similarities, and that really gives you a place to hang your hat, kind of, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so and I kind of review it and try to weed out things I think are my own head interfering or my own experiences, and things that I really think are real. I actually had one experience that I read later, like in a scholarly text, a description of a carving that kind of bore out something I had seen in my trance. So that was really kind of exciting, because that was something that was carved on a stone, like back in the Roman Empire.
And you had no prior knowledge.
Yeah, I didn't until I read that book. Before I didn't have the prior knowledge before doing the trance.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I know.
Do you think it's useful to physically go to a sacred site, or to physically be in the presence of some of these old statuaries and things in order to align with the particular deities?
Oh, sure, if you can. I think that's great. I haven't had an opportunity to travel to a lot of places, but I know people have gone to some places like Uppsala, where they used to have the great assemblies in Sweden. I did get to go to North Germany once and saw some actual rune stones in a museum, and it's true, like seeing like a real rune stone that was carved hundreds of years ago. And I do work with runes too. It was just kind of exciting. It was like there's certain runes that are harder to carve than others, and like I saw a rune on one of those rune stones that had a slight flaw in the carving that's exactly the way I carve a rune, and I have that same flaw because it's hard to get that angle. And it really made me feel connected to that person. It's like, this is a person, I'm doing what he did, and we have the same problem with that particular carving.
Kind of erases all the years, and you feel like you've got a kindred spirit next to you.
Yeah. And it's like, I know why that chip is there because I've done that, and I know exactly how that happens, Yeah.
So how does ritual play in here? Would you mind sharing a little bit about the rituals that you use and why?
That's kind of the first thing I guess I ever did or was participated in when I started becoming involved in this sort of activity. And because I have a background in theater, I kind of like to do ritual. I find it it has a powerful effect on me. I feel like I can do it well, and it's something I know how to work with. So it's a very good way for me to get connected with the gods or whatever I'm doing. I think, like, whereas tranceworking is sort of like me trying to go out into the world of the gods to encounter them, I feel like ritual is a way to try to invite the gods, draw them down here to my world, to kind of meet in that ritual space. So it's kind of the other side of the coin, I see it as. Working with ritual, using movements and smells and like colors of altar cloths or whatever, decorations. I think all those sensory things are a good way to focus your mind and also evoke the kind of emotional energy that you need to successfully reach beings of another world. So I think in that way, I know some people that have years of experience say they don't need to do any ritual at all, and perhaps they don't, but I think for most of us, especially when starting out, you really kind of need all those bells and whistles to kind of get your mind focused and resonating with what you're doing. So I usually start out doing kind of a setting aside a sacred place. I don't necessarily do a lot of protective work unless I'm really doing rune magic or something. I do tend to do protection when I'm doing tranceworking too, because I really don't see trance as just opening yourself up to whoever wants to talk to you, as it were. I think you should be focused. I think you should always intend to do tranceworking and not just go spontaneously into a trance. And I think you should have an idea of what you want to do and not just kind of be open to whatever shows up. Because I don't believe that, I think it can be harmful to just kind of, any more than you would leave your house door open all the time to whoever wanted to come in.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's like, if we don't use focus and intent, we're going to get a mixed bag, and we don't even know how to interpret it if we don't have that focus and intent to go back to. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yes. And I mean, I usually intend to contact a certain deity, and that's usually who I contact. Sometimes I've had other gods or goddesses show up in the trance, but they were people or beings that I already worked with, not like an intruder. So,
what do you make of it when that happens?
I think either that has something to say about the goddess I am working with, do they have a relationship with that other god that that happened to be there? Sometimes, if a god in the mythology is said to be married or have a family, those people will show up, and that seems more obvious that they're associated with that god. Or sometimes I have had a god that I work with a lot, and I felt like they showed up because they had something to tell me or show me in particular that I was not focusing on, but that they felt I should think about, which was true, as it turned out. But anyway, when I set up the ritual space, and I set up a protective or a sacred space, which I think rituals in most cultures, both magical and religious, usually start out that way, really. And then like I said, I might have incense or certain colors of things or certain symbols of things like flowers or corn or what, something that I think might be symbolic of the god or goddess I'm working with, and I do some preliminary speeches. I usually make a statement of intent, like I'm going to contact this goddess, and I'll have written a little invocation, kind of as poetic as I can make it, and
we're going to have to take we're going to have to take another little break. We'll be back on the flip side. Alice and I will be back after this commercial break. You're listening to The Science of Magic, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. You can always listen to previous transformative broadcasts on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is the Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to our world. Our website is www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Alice Karlsdóttir, author of Norse Goddess Magic, Trancework, Mythology, and Ritual. Her website is www.mad-alice.blogspot.com. Alice, we were talking about what kind of ritual you use when you go into trance work in order to contact the deities. And I was wondering, do you contact the deities with specific questions in mind?
Sometimes I have. This trance working described in my book, I was really just trying to find something out about those particular deities, because they were goddesses that there wasn't very much lore on, and I kind of wanted to make a connection. So that was kind of my purpose. And I usually do that. If I have a problem, I might want to contact a certain deity that I think might help me, but I don't always have a specific question. But I have gone to, I have done trance workings usually to gods or goddesses that I've worked with before, or feel like I have a pretty good connection with a specific question, if there's something, pending, something pressing on me.
Okay. So when you were doing the trance work for your book, you were trying to find out more information about the goddess themselves. Is that correct?
Yes. I was actually trying to find the information out for ritual work with a group I used to work with, Okrun Circle, and actually the book kind of came afterwards. So I didn't actually do a lot of the trance working specifically for a book. It was in order to do working rituals. And then later, when I was about halfway through them, I decided to write it down.
Okay, and then thus came the book. Speaking of which, where can people find your book?
Well, it's published by Inner Traditions, and it's available Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the typical websites, and some bookstores, or probably through the Inner Traditions website or catalog.
Okay. It's a beautiful cover on there. Who's the goddess on the cover?
That's actually, it's from a bowl that they found in a dig, and I'm not sure it's actually a Norse goddess, or not one I recognize, because it's a much older thing. It might not be from the Norse pantheon. I believe it was found in a Germanic area, but I'm not sure who it is. So.
We have about half a minute left. Do you have something you'd like to share with our listeners in closing?
I guess just that if trance working is something that people can learn to do, and if you set up a protected space, it's really something that you shouldn't be afraid to try if you feel like that's something that would help you, and to just kind of take it slow and write down what you find out and see what you can learn.
Why do you think ritual works?
Well, like I said, it does put your mind, your spirit in kind of an otherworldly place. I think it's a way of going back to that beginning time between the worlds where the myths take place.
Beautiful.
Kind of outside of time and outside of this space.
This has been wonderful, Alice. Thank you so much for being with us. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge, comforted with love, as we embrace the fifth world emerging.
One people, one nation.